Warning: the following reading contains content that some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Let me tell you about my best friend Clarissa, for everything in the story is about her. This is our story about our love and our friendship for each other and ourselves. I was around 11 years old at the time, or almost 12 as I would probably tell anyone who asked, which to be honest, no one ever really did. It was the beginning of summer 2016 when everything happened. The last few days of school had ended, and like every other day before that, I found myself alone with the other girls on the block, ending up in Clarissa's yard playing with her My Little Pony toys as usual. Which, to tell the truth, while I did love the show, I even had a few dolls, Starlight Glimmer being my personal favorite. I was starting to feel a little too old to be playing with her toys like this along with the other girls. There were other sensations I was starting to feel, places I wanted to explore, new things I wanted to experience, but I went along with it anyway because Clarissa wanted it. And we always ended up doing whatever Clarissa wanted, and Clarissa just wouldn't take no for an answer. I tried to find other things to do, other friends to be with, to be playing different games, but day after day, no matter how much I tried, I always ended up back in our yard, having the same pony adventures we always had with the 6 of us going out to the magical lands together. I always ended up being Rainbow Dash in our game. I don't know why Clarissa insisted I had to be Rainbow Dash when we played. I was nothing like her in reality. Sure, I was on the school track team, but I wasn't really any good, and I planned to not take it in the following school year when it started up again. Just like my other friend Velma, who was a quiet, skinny, shy girl destined to be Fluttershy no matter how much she whined or complained. Lara was her favorite pony and she wanted to desperately play as her, but Clarissa wouldn't have any of it, insisting that she play as Fluttershy because she was so quiet and her father was a vet. So she gave in and became Fluttershy in our pretend land of Equestria, just like our other friends were chosen for the other ponies. Yasmin had been chosen to play Pinkie Pie, even if she wasn't particularly bubbly like Tamara, who would have been a much better fit, but Clarissa insisted she was Rarity in our world. I never knew what her logic was in choosing who we were supposed to play as, but once my friend had chosen that, it's what you end up being, with Clarissa always being Twilight Sparkle, of course. And that we would, playing for hours in her backyard, losing all sense of time as the 6 of us would imagine magical friendship adventures, which we were constantly having to save Equestria time after time. Finally stopping when I would hear my mom yelling at me to hurry my butt back home for dinner, realizing that I had lost total track of time from playing. Clarissa tended to do that, drag you into her world, not realizing you had left the other one far behind. It was such a fantastic place none of us ever wanted to leave. Right after the Memorial Day, everything forever changed. I had gone to the movies with my other friends that day as Clarissa had gone on a family vacation to a cabin they owned by a lake near the forest about 5 or 6 hours away from our town. It was a yearly ritual for them as the family left around the beginning of summer, returning usually right after the 4th of July. It was a Tuesday and I had made it home from the theater just as the sun was starting to set. I was hungry, hot, and hoped my mom was going to make tacos for dinner like she said she was going to earlier that day. I will never forget the look on both of their faces when I entered the kitchen. The sadness, the anguish. They were trying so very hard not to cry and failing completely. Quietly, my father sat me down and told me everything. It was a cheerful summer day when it happened. The kind of day adults think of when they remember the better times of their youth. There was an old rope swing at the lake that everybody had used at least once in their lives when they went there. It was removed shortly after the incident from what I've been told. On that day, without a care in the world, Clarissa hopped from the cabin right after lunch to enjoy the start of her summer holiday with the noon swim. Though I'm not sure who told me, I heard she was trying to impress some cute boys she had met earlier that day. I don't think that really matters. I'm positive the end would have been the same regardless. As my friend jumped on the old swing, letting it carry her from across the water, Back and forth she swung on that rope, letting it take her as high as it could go, up to where the birds flew, up to where the alicorns of Pegasus called home. Finally letting it go when Clarissa was almost as high as the three it had been tied to. Twisting and turning, my friend dove headfirst into the water. I just know it would have been an amazing sight to have seen. No one noticed the submerged tree stump lying just under the water. Invisible to everyone, Clarissa smashed her head into it when she hit the water and sunk beneath the waves. Unconscious, she had taken in huge amounts of water while she dove deeper into the lake. It was a rising red circle in the lake of blue that alerted the other swimmers that something was very wrong. She must have been under for at least a few minutes until the rescuers dove in after her and dragged her limp, lifeless body from the water while her family called for an ambulance. It was already too late by then. She was still alive when I was told of her accident, but she suffered massive head and brain trauma and wasn't expected to ever regain consciousness. I know this sounds mean, but the truth was there really wasn't anything left inside of her head for her to wake up with. 3 days later, she had finally passed on. I cried. My friends cried. We all cried. The whole world seemed to have lost something special that day to me, something unique. I felt the color wash away, and it has never really returned like it used to be. Even after all these years, the world still seems quite bland and empty. The last time I saw my friend Clarissa was at her viewing a week later. The funeral directors had done a really good job on her. She looked so peaceful and calm that day. I remember her sporting a slight grin on her face as if any moment she was going to spring up and yell "gotcha" at us. To tell the truth, I kinda expected it. I remember her coffin being surprisingly small as it held the child who had just barely entered the beginnings of adulthood. Surprised me with the realization just how young and small she was. I never thought of it until then. She had on her favorite yellow dress with her long blonde hair spilling out from the sides of her pillow her head rested on. In the coffin, her parents had placed a few of her things to keep her company. One was a Luna plushie given to her by an uncle at Christmas a few years ago. A couple of Equestrian girls' figures she had loved, along with her most favorite thing in the world, that Twilight Sparkle doll of hers she had gotten ever since she found the show and had fallen in love with it and had been placed so carefully and lovingly in her hand. That same doll she had always brought with her everywhere she went. It had never been there for Clarissa when she had her accident, silently watching over her in the hospital all those days before she died. I could think of no one better to protect my best friend than Twilight Sparkle. I remember sitting there next to my family and remaining friends as we listened to some minister I had never seen before going on about the mysteries of life and how every day is precious, along with Clarissa's mother and father, joined by a few other people I knew, telling us just how wonderful a person she was, and she will always be in our hearts. I have to confess I really don't remember much of what they said at the time. My eyes, along with my attention, kept wandering back to Clarissa's casket, staring at the Twilight Sparkle doll as it peeked out from the edges as if watching everyone that was going on, not wanting to miss anything. Its purple plastic empty eyes seemingly locked onto mine, unblinking, unwavering as it stared motionless.
I'm so cold and alone.
I could almost hear her whisper to me.
Where are my friends? Where is Rarity? Where is Pinkie? Applejack? Fluttershy? And of course Rainbow Dash. I miss them so much. I can't be alone forever without my wonderful friends. Please don't let them leave me by myself in the dark.
A wave of sadness seemed to rush out of the doll and engulf me, enveloping me with the most intense sensation of loneliness and depression I have ever felt, while the rest of the world seemed to fade away from me. I could not pull my eyes away from her no matter how hard I tried. The Twilight Sparkle doll. The lonely, scared Twilight Sparkle who just wanted to be with her friends was terrified of what was going on, and I knew it. I don't know how long I sat there just staring at her, losing myself to those destructive, empty feelings that to this day I hope to never feel again. I didn't notice the tears falling down my face, didn't notice that I was sobbing uncontrollably. All I could do was watch the terrified doll and cry. It was my parents gently prodding me towards my feet that I finally snapped back to the land of the living, as it were. But I still watched her, waiting for the doll to make its move. There were so many who had come to say goodbye to my friend, and I walked among them, dressed in black in a sea of black, following closely behind the pallbearers who carried the tiny coffin the short walk to the cemetery right behind the funeral home. It was so quiet that day. Not a sound could be heard except for some quiet sniffle, a muffled sob. I remember feeling like the whole world was paying its respect to one who truly brightened up the earth. And still I could feel Twilight Sparkle's eyes still staring at me, watching me from inside the box that held my sleeping friend. I could still feel her loneliness when Clarissa was slowly lowered into the freshly dug earth for her final resting place. Some primal instinct dug deep inside me just knew that her eyes were still following me as I moved around the grave in a foolish hope to make this depressing sensation end, while this insane knowledge that Twilight Sparkle was following me around wherever I went. She was so terrified, so alone. It was too dark and I already smelled like earth. She didn't want any of this. Twilight just wanted to be with her friends. The feelings did not stop as I said my final goodbyes to Clarissa and walked away to the only sound of the soft crunch of the leaves under my black dress shoes. The feeling of being watched did not stop until I was far, far away from the cemetery. Deep within the darkness, surrounded by the overpowering odor of damp, moist earth and the almost oppressive silence so loud as to possess the ability to utterly destroy any remaining sparks of sanity that might have survived in this strange new world. It was here, the soft whimpering of a weeping purple alicorn sitting there all alone could be heard, away from her friends, away from everything that was so important to her. Lost to the light, she cried, unable to even bear the thought of her eternal life abandoned under soft earth. It was when she was at her lowest that she felt a gentle hoof softly caressing her back, a gentle touch that understood the pain of a lonely alicorn.
Don't be such a Debbie Downer,
said a terminally cheerful voice.
Oh, Pinkie Pie, I missed you so much,
cried Twilight Sparkle, laughing and crying at seeing her friend again. That even in the absence of light, Twilight Sparkle knew her best friend.
Twilight, you know you will never be alone. We will always be together forever.
Giggled Pinkie.
Friends together, always friends forever,
she whispered while hugging her lost, now found friend, letting her cry on her shoulder while they waited in the darkness for the others to arrive. I was freezing when I slowly started to become aware of the world outside of my dreamless sleep. I remembered the strange gritty taste of earth in my mouth, the crunchy noise every time I closed it. Like the time Clarissa had gotten me to eat that mud pie she had made for me when I was 7. I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes and worked my surprisingly sore and stiff muscles to life. When I realized I was just smearing filth and grime across my face, I was filthy. My nightgown was filthy. My bed was filthy. Everything was filthy. I didn't have time to wonder what I had done the night before, as I was more afraid of my mom getting up and seeing the mess I had made. I made my way to the bathroom to shower and clean up myself. Fortunately, today was laundry day and I was sure I could smuggle my clothes and bed sheets along with the other things and no one would be the wiser when I happened to pass one of the hallway windows on the way to the bathroom. It was then that I saw it. Clarissa's parents had gone away shortly after her funeral. I'm not sure where. Someplace where they could process their loss, I'm sure. Someplace where they didn't have to deal with so many memories of leaving their house empty for the time being. It was in the middle of that empty backyard Clarissa's Twilight Sparkle doll sat, the one I was positive she had been buried with, quietly sitting in her backyard, staring at me with those lavender eyes of hers. Next to her sat Pinkie Pie, watching me as well with her pink legs wrapped around Twilight, like two forgotten friends who have finally found each other again. I thought it was weird, but I didn't care at the time as I had more important problems to deal with, like how I better get it cleaned up before my mom sees the mess and kills me. The morning continued on in its usual routine. The sun had started to make its trek across the sky while I found myself mindlessly sitting at the table eating breakfast, blankly staring at the cereal box while trying to read it, but in my sleep-deprived state I couldn't make out the words despite how many times I tried to read it. Truth to be told, I could still feel the sadness and loss welling up inside me, making it difficult to even think. But I knew I had to keep going. I just knew. Not just for my friend's sake, but for myself as well. Clarissa wouldn't be too happy to know I was wasting away because of her. It was then when I heard it. A loud scream of anguish overlapping with pain and transforming into a shrill that came from outside of my house and a few houses down from me, waking up the rest of the neighborhood as well, I'm sure. A mixture of curiosity and fear enveloped me as I made my way out of the front door to see what was the matter. Finding the mother of another friend of mine, Yasmin, collapsing in the middle of the street in her red nightgown, crying while her father was failing in his attempts to comfort her while also trying to bring her back inside. It was then I could hear the police sirens off in the distance getting closer and closer. It was then my mother had to come out. Realizing what was going on, she pushed me back inside, slamming the door in my face. And I could still hear Yasmin's mom screaming. It was later that day when I was told what had happened, how her mother had gone to her daughter's room to wake her up and found her daughter missing, her bed and pillows smeared with dried blood with the front door wide open. The police that did the investigating came by to talk to me and the other girls, telling us to be aware of strangers and if we even see the slightest thing wrong to tell an adult immediately. To me, the answer is very simple. Clarissa just wanted to be with her friends.
Who's there?
Asked Twilight, her ears twitching from the unfamiliar sounds of something moving in the darkness.
Oh, darling, why didn't you tell me you were in such a smelly old place?
Rarity said, wrinkling her nose in disgust.
This place definitely needs a mayor's touch. Seriously, what were they thinking? This place is simply dreadful.
Rarity, you're here too?
Twilight cried as her heart leaped from her chest when the fancy white pony strode towards her good friend.
Of course, Twilight. You didn't think you would be all alone, would you? Ponyville will just have to wait until we are all together,
said Rarity as she sat next to Twilight. It was a week later when Tamara vanished. Again, I had woken up to dirty, smelling earth. Again, I spotted a new addition to Clarissa's yard while making my way to the bathroom. The Rarity doll sat next to the others, and I could feel a sense of joy radiating from the three that I hadn't felt before. United once again, the collection of ponies knew they were never going to be alone ever again. Even from where I stood, I could feel the happiness of the friends finally reuniting once again after such a long time of solitude. I knew somewhere, someplace, Clarissa was happy. Once again, our street was flooded with police sirens and flashing lights while the neighborhood I grew up in was starting to break down. Accusations and harsh, anger-filled emotions flew from one person to another. Everyone suspected each other as having something to do with this nightmare. For a second time, I, along with the remaining girls, were questioned again, but I could give them no answers as to where my friend could be. At least not the answers they wanted to hear or believe. The three of us were given another lecture about being cautious and to report any strangers that we come across. We all nodded like the obedient children that we were before going back to our parents, back inside our homes while the police continued to search for any clues they could find.
Shucks, Twilight. You've been a-fretting all this time thinking we gone and forgot about you? Now why would you go and think something foolish like that?
Asked Applejack slowly, making her way deeper into the pit with the others that were waiting patiently.
Applejack, you're here too?
Said Twilight, unable to keep the joy out of her voice while focusing on the sound of her friend in the complete darkness.
Oh, Twilight, you must have hit your head against some rock if you think I'm gonna leave you all by your lonesome. We're family, and family never abandons each other.
Applejack chided.
Heck, looks like some of the others made it here before me.
She said as she grouped with the others and waited in the darkness. My block became a prison when Vanessa vanished without a trace a few weeks later. I knew she was gone when I spotted the Applejack doll in Clarissa's backyard. Vanessa was gone and was never coming back. I stared at the doll standing quietly alongside the others, watching, waiting, understanding secret things only they could know about. Nobody paid attention to them. Nobody saw. Nobody noticed. Nobody but me. They seemed so happy together, the four of them sitting in a semicircle in the middle of the yard, comforted at being reunited once again. Twilight had found her friends. It made me wonder what all the fuss was about. After all, if my friends were happy together, why couldn't the adults feel the same way? Isn't that the message from My Little Pony? That friendship is magical. That friendship is the most important thing in our lives. The 4th of July came and went and no one felt like celebrating. There were only two of us left now on that block. Velma and I really did miss my friends. I missed them so much. Sometimes I would cry myself to sleep knowing that I would never see them again. Tamara, Vanessa, Yasmin, and of course my very best friend in the whole world, Clarissa. But in my sadness, I also felt great joy knowing that my friends were someplace much, much better than they were before. A place without pain, without sadness or hurt. A place a person could be truly happy. A place for anybody, or should I say any pony.
Fluttershy?
Said a voice in the earthly darkness.
You finally joined us here. I'm so happy. I was starting to worry that you would not make it.
Oh, you poor dears. You must have been waiting so long.
Said Fluttershy.
I didn't mean to take so long. But look, I brought another friend with me.
It's about time you told her I was with you.
Grumbled Rainbow Dash.
But you didn't tell her how awesome I am.
Rainbow Dash, you came too?
Asked the voice.
What? You didn't think I wasn't going to show up and let everyone else have all the fun?
Rainbow Dash said.
Think I was going to miss Pinkie Pie's Welcome Back to Ponyville party?
Oh, girls, I'm just so happy that we are all back together and go back to Equestria.
Cried Twilight, trying to hold her tears in.
But I'm a little confused. How come I can't see either of you?
Don't worry about that.
Said Fluttershy.
We just had to complete the magic spell first in order to see you.
Magic spell?
Asked Twilight, sounding a little confused.
Is this something Starlight Glimmer gave you?
Nah. This is a totally cool thing we found that will let us be together forever.
Rainbow Dash said with a mixture of pride and a little fear in her voice.
That's how we were able to get the others to come. Now we just have to complete the friendship magic, and we'll be back at home in your castle before you know it.
And you both know how to do it?
Just watch.
Said Fluttershy, closing her eyes and lowering herself to the ground while Rainbow Dash raised the object she had been holding above her head. The metal caught the light off the moon as it gleamed in the darkness. The magic wand in that old chest they had found in that forgotten cave held the power for all of them to be together now and forever. It wasn't easy as everyone knew Pegasus weren't the best at using magic. But they both knew its magic was strong as they have already used it time and time again.
Ready?
Said Fluttershy with a nod to her friend as Rainbow Dash gritted her teeth preparing to use the magic wand once again. She could feel its power throbbing in anticipation in her hoof while her heart fluttered uncontrollably to her chest. She started the countdown like before.
5, 4, 3, 2.
It happened so suddenly when the evil blinding light came from nowhere, illuminating everything it touches, burning the darkness away and exposing the two tiny ponies to the unforgiving light.
Fluttershy? Rainbow Dash?
Yelled Twilight, her words cutting off by the roar of dark hostile creatures emerging from the light and surrounding Fluttershy while Rainbow Dash found herself backing away from the area in confusion, retreating to the darkened edges where she could not be seen. The cops were very rough with Velma when they slammed her to the ground in Clarissa's backyard. They were so intent with her I was able to slip across her yard using a loose fence post and back into mine. I took just a moment as I ran up to the window in my room on the second floor. I watched as they handcuffed my screaming friend and placed her into the back of some waiting police car, hidden from everyone except for my friend who kept staring up as I watched it all in safety. The sadness in her eyes as we didn't complete the magic that was necessary for us to be together forever. I never felt so heartbroken as then. It was Velma's father who turned her in after he noticed the missing supplies he had from his veterinary practice. The stuff we used to knock out our other friends as I struck them in the head with the hammer I had found in the back of my father's toolbox. I watched as the police dug up the bodies of the other girls both of us had so carefully buried in the yard across from me, destroying the dolls we had so carefully placed in a circle. I watched as my parents forced me away from the window, taking me to my grandparents who lived in the next town over. I half expected the police to come and arrest me as well, but when they finally did come, all they did was ask me some questions about Velma and left shortly afterwards. But as time rolled by, everything began to move on and I began to grow up. No matter what, I could not stop thinking about my lost friends, waiting for me to join them in that dark hole under the earth, waiting for their Fluttershy, waiting for their Rainbow Dash. The last time I heard from Velma was about a year ago. I was 15 then. It was a letter from an asylum she had been committed to all this time. Velma never did tell them our little game, and for that I am thankful. But I was heartbroken as well when she said she realized what she had done was wrong. You see, Velma no longer believed in magic, no longer believed in friendship. Velma didn't want to play My Little Pony anymore. She just wanted to be left alone. For a year I was heartbroken as I thought I would never be with my friends again. Even after all these years, I still miss them and I know they are waiting for me, waiting for Fluttershy. For you see, we can't go until we are all together again. It was then that I saw you from across the street. You and your family had just moved into Tamara's old house for a week when you caught my attention while you sat on the lawn playing with your Fluttershy doll. And I realized I was just being a silly little girl. There will always be a Fluttershy. It just didn't matter who played her. I do have to admit it was way too easy to befriend you. to convince you into my house that one Saturday while my parents were away. I still had one of Velma's syringes full of the tranquilizer we had used on the other girls safely hidden next to the hammer I keep under my bed. I hope the bindings aren't too tight, as I really don't want you to hurt yourself, but I can't have you leaving until the magic of friendship is completed. I see you're crying. I wish you wouldn't be so sad. Don't you understand? Don't you see? Ask anyone and they'll tell you that it is a well-known fact that everyone goes to Equestria when we die. I'm just getting you there a little faster.